welcome to the Driven Career Podcast. This is a space where we talk about professional life, personal development to inspire you to overcome the challenges and grow in your career. Today, I'm very excited to talk with David FitzGerald. He is the founder of Starboard Recruitment here in Vancouver, Canada. And in this episode, we will dive into how driven professionals can navigate the evolving market and really set themselves for success. So let's go to the episode. Hey, Dave, thank you so much for joining us in our episode from the Driven Career Podcast today. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm excited to be here. Thanks, Rachel.
Yes, you're very welcome. So let's start from your introductions. Let's start from you telling us a little bit about who you are and what do you do.
For sure. Yeah. Um, basically, I run my own sort of boutique recruitment agency, Starboard Recruitment. I've got a long history of working with a lot of tech companies, especially, you know, basically ranging from early stage startup up to much more established companies like TikTok, Discord, Six Sense, gaming companies like EA, a lot of different tech companies. And then in the past couple of years, I've started to get more and more involved in the mining space as well. And then also there's a lot of interesting stuff happening between sort of on the bridge between the tech and the mining world. So that's been sort of my more recent focus. But yeah, work with all kinds of tech and mining companies to help build their teams, especially sort of senior and leadership talent.
Thank you. Yeah, that's why I thought that would be super interesting to have you here because you're super expert in recruitment and you've been helping companies place top talent in the tech and the mining. So let's start from the major questions that our listeners are usually interested to hear about. What are the key qualities that make a candidate stand out for senior and executive level roles today?
For sure, yeah. Obviously, when you're looking at senior and executive talent, there's, specific experience that they should have, whether it's years of experience with certain technologies or maybe certain phases of growth that a company's gone through, that they can, bring that experience and help guide this new company through that. So there's obviously a lot of like specific sort of skills and experiences, but um, I think across the board, no matter what, if it's a junior all the way up to executive role. I always find that actually at the end of the day, the difference maker often comes down to culture fit. And when I say culture fit, I mean specifically, the attitude that they bring, the solution oriented sort of mindset that they bring, specifically not bringing an ego, because I've seen so many talented people over the years uh, who are, perfect for the role, on paper. Um, but either they have an ego that, the team is hesitant to bring in because ego can really erode a culture. Um, or, in often cases, it's a competitive environment. There's multiple people for a role. And if they both have great skill sets, then they're going to lean towards the one that's going to be a better culture fit for the team. So, um, yeah, it's obviously the skills are important, but it's often that attitude piece that is really the game changer.
That's true. Well, and I also have memories like we work together in this type of recruitment. And I totally remember when you were aligning those topics. And that was so important to really match the cultural fit of those candidates. And then from your experience working with high growth startup companies and established companies in the market, let's talk about the mistakes, or at least from the major mistakes that whenever you connect with the candidates, job seekers, or whenever you follow up with hiring managers from the companies you are working with. What can we share about those biggest mistakes that job seekers make when they're navigating the hiring process?
Yeah, um, I think one of the big ones is understanding, I guess, that hiring is challenging, and candidates can really help facilitate a better hiring experience in a number of ways. Um, and when I say that, what I mean is that a lot of people who are on the hiring team side of things, they're trying to evaluate the skill sets of a candidate and decide if this person is the right fit for a role, which is a challenge within itself. I think anyone who's been an interviewer and gone through that process of learning how to interview and evaluate talent, um, it is quite a learning curve, and I think it's something that you never um, completely master. It's always something that you've got to continue to develop. The challenge is kind of figuring out, obviously, is this candidate good for the role? And there's all these sort of psychological parts of that is where, if nobody wants to hire someone who doesn't work out. So basically, they want to have a lot of sort of ammunition in their brain to think, okay, well, why is this person good for the role? I want to be able to turn around and talk to my team in the debrief of like, they said X, Y, Z. This is exactly tied to what we're looking for. Obviously, I really enjoyed speaking with them on a personal level as well. There's a lot of different factors. Um, but basically, I think one of the big mistakes that candidates make, or maybe one of the big improvements that they could make, is when they're presenting themselves in an interview. Um, a lot of candidates, what they'll do is they'll start talking about their experience in a very broad sort of way. They'll kind of you might ask them one question about a specific thing, and then all of a sudden you get an answer that kind of feels like it goes on forever, talking about their whole life story and their career. Um, and obviously, you want to share a lot of information and experiences that you've had. But I think the better thing to do um, that candidates can do is perhaps ask the interviewer specifically, like, what is the biggest challenges that your team's facing right now, and how is this role specifically going to help solve those challenges, or how would you like this role to help solve those challenges? Because then the interview is going to specifically say like, this is why we're filling this role, and that kind of gives like a blueprint or a roadmap for the candidate to be, oh well, I have XYZ experience that I think ties in quite well to that. Or maybe they don't have experience that aligns well with it specifically, but they can be honest and truthful about it and say, I actually don't have a lot of experience with that, but I have experienced this, and I think that could help in the situation from a different sort of perspective and things like that. I guess long answer short is that um, candidates should be more specific about how their experience is good for that role, rather than trying to go down the path of making sure they mention everything about every step of their career journey, or going off on tangents like that.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I also like to mention that the good thing of working with recruiters is that usually there is like a debrief and candidates come more prepared in terms of they know more about the company because you guys do a great job filling them, adding some information and explaining more. But I can mention that I think one of the mistakes that I usually notice is that whenever they apply directly, for us in HR doing recruitment in house, is that some candidates are not really prepared to demonstrate what they know about the company. And that causes a little of clash of you don't really understand what we do, so that they find hard time to demonstrate their value and how they can help us to solve problems.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's a really good point. And it's like, I think it's a big game changer. Obviously, again, it's these little things that, like, once it comes down to the line, especially in a competitive environment, where if it's clear a candidate is excited about what the team's working on, it's a huge difference. And there's no better way to show that you're excited about what they're working on than knowing what they're working on and being able to talk about it. Because if it's kind of one of these things, it's always interesting. It's like it's not always what what you do or you don't do, but sort of yeah, speaking to showing that you've put that research into the company is such a game changer, because if you don't communicate it, maybe you have done research but you don't really communicate it through the interview process. It's just these sort of boxes to be checked, if that makes sense. Yeah.
and just one more thing, I like what you said about maybe asking this question when you are meeting with the hiring manager, just to get the opportunity to understand a little bit more about what are the challenges that the team is going through, so they can connect the dots and
Yes.
find back to their background, like, oh, all right, so this is your challenge. I have done this, and this is how you can customize right away your answers, right? Because especially when you are in a hiring process, we have a limited time to talk with candidates, and if they don't come prepared to share their major experiences or what is relevant for that conversation, we don't really have much time to hear all of your story of 20 years of experience, 15 or so on, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's a very time consuming job going through the interview process. So I think one of the benefits, I suppose, of that is that candidates have an opportunity that if they can make themselves stand out really well in the process, the team is very likely going to kind of get very excited about their candidacy and probably move quite quickly with their process, or as quickly as they can, because everyone kind of wants to wrap up hiring processes as quickly as possible. As the key is finding the right person. So if you do a good job of demonstrating why you're good, things are going to move quite smoothly.
That's right. Well, let's shift the gear here a little bit. What strategies do you believe, David, that candidates should focus on to future proof their careers and stay relevant in such competitive industry and job market nowadays?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question these days, I think, especially. A lot of new technology. Obviously, there's a lot of talk about AI. Then on top of that, the markets themselves are really dynamic. So it almost feels a little bit, yeah, almost impossible to say like future proof completely, because things are changing so much. But I think the best way is just sort of having navigating from a very open mind and sort of learning perspective. It's so important these days, I'd say more now than ever, to consistently, you know, be learning new things. And it can be quite daunting, I think. I look at AI and I think it's quite daunting for a lot of people to think like, okay, like I'm not some data scientist, I'm not an AI ML engineer. Like how am I supposed to understand this? You don't need to know kind of how everything works. You can sort of take bite-sized pieces on a consistent basis, and just by doing that, be sort of leaps and bounds ahead of a lot of other people. It's these challenges of like tackling big problems like learning AI, or sort of using it to optimize it. That's the opportunities are innately within that challenge, where you know that a lot of people aren't going to do it. So if you do it, you're going to stand out quite a bit. So I often compare it to like learning the piano, because if you're like me, if I go and sat beside in front of a piano, I don't know how to play piano very well, anyways. And it's very intimidating to try to learn if you don't have some sort of frameworks, or practicing on a consistent basis. You might see someone who's like an expert playing the piano, and you're thinking, how is this person doing it? They're a genius or something. But they've really just put in some practice, and after a couple of years of practice, all of a sudden something clicks, and you look like an absolute expert compared to other people. And it's similar in that vein. But so in terms of, I guess, staying competitive in this market, I do think it's really important to continue to learn and pick up new skills consistently, and being sort of aware of new technologies coming out. I also think it's really important to kind of approach things with somewhat of an entrepreneurial mindset. I think people
Yes.
are doing things, their jobs are, not like they used to be, where you'd stay with a company for, potentially your entire career. It's very common that people are moving jobs every couple of years, or even more frequently than that, whether they like it or not these days, with a lot of layoffs and stuff like that. Um, so I think it's important to kind of, uh, I guess, sort of accept that, and realize that that's the reality for us moving forward. And I think part of doing well in that environment is that realizing networking is so important, and having that as like a consistent part of your business. And that's why I say entrepreneurial approach, because when you're running your own business, um, you do your day to day and you can get very busy, but you always have to carve out a little bit of time to do business development, because you need to be working towards like down the track and making sure you don't run out of clients and then be stressing all of a sudden. It's much better to be doing these bite-sized sort of tasks, um, of business development or networking in your day-to-day career. Um, and then I guess the third thing I'll say is I think optimizing. Um, this is probably one of the easiest things to do is optimizing your resume and LinkedIn profile and stuff like that in the best way, because we are seeing these introductions of AI tools and things like this, in especially on the sourcing layer on the recruitment side. So a lot of these opportunities are coming to people because some technology or AI tool has basically scraped the web and identified certain profiles as this would be a good person for this role. This is what all these tools are sort of built off of. But these AI tools won't identify you as a good candidate unless you've filled out your LinkedIn profile or your resume with all the right information, the keywords of the experience that you have. That's really how these tools work. They search booleans. They search, where are you located? How many years of experience do you have? What technologies or what have you worked with? Um, so a lot of people have LinkedIn profiles that haven't been filled out. There's not a lot of detail, um, and so those are going to be the hardest profiles for these tools to find. And as companies lean on them more and more, if you're not doing that, you're basically only getting a fraction of the opportunities available to you.
That is important. I noticed that um, when you have a more established job, some people kind of neglect to work on their LinkedIn profile, and some candidates don't even mind to add a picture and adding their key information on their profile. And I think that just makes your job harder to find these talents, right? So whenever there is a layoff or whenever you are actually maybe even considering a work transition, it's just hard to be found in that pool of all talents majority speaking, the LinkedIn, right? Is that the major one that you also work with?
Yeah, that's I think that's like the definitely the main one. There's more and more tools that are um, looking at other platforms as well. But yeah, LinkedIn is the go-to for sure.
So when you can you tell us a little bit of what do you search whenever you're looking for the talent? What are the key things that you look firsthand when you're searching for the candidates on LinkedIn?
Yeah, that's a big question. I feel like it can be really specific to the role, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it's an interesting one because you don't want to be biased. You want to try to take out as much bias as possible through the process. Um, so it's not like, do you have a good profile photo necessarily, or those types of things. Um, it, it, I mean, the roles that I work on are usually quite technical, and so I'm looking for specific experience within certain tools and technologies and things like that. I often look at what companies they've worked at, what type of companies they are, so what stages of growth have they gone through while being at those companies. Um, but yeah, I do like to attract kind of approach searches with a relatively broad stroke because when you're putting a team together, um, you generally don't want to create a team of all the same people. Sometimes it's good to get someone from more of a startup environment moving into a
Yes.
larger company, because honestly, a lot of these larger companies basically have startups uh, inside of them. So I think there's a lot of misconception there at times. And then often there's people who are at big companies and they're really tired of um, not having enough opportunity to make impact, or there's too much red tape. So they're actually really fired up and ready to get into a startup environment and make something happen there. So it really comes down to, honestly, like, the skill alignment and things like that is kind of like the baseline. And then getting on a call with candidates and getting an idea of their motivation and their character. And um, I think that's, yeah, like there, you bring in the right person at the right time, and being motivated by the right reasons is just as important, if not more important, at times than the technical skills. So yeah, it's a challenging one to answer. Honestly, it comes down to yeah, identifying people whose profiles do look good, but being open to having conversations with various people that sort of it's not always clear on their resume and things like that that they have the skills, especially when people aren't filling out their LinkedIn profiles in much detail. Sometimes you have to kind of take a bit of a chance and see how it goes on a phone call. Some of the most talented people aren't very good at filling out their LinkedIn profile, often because they're used to having a lot of opportunity flowing to them because just through their uh, network of colleagues and things like that. Um, so yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good. And I was also thinking that I know you work with tech and mining industries. Uh, what do you recommend to candidates when they're trying to do this transition coming from other industries? Usually they have a different background based on the industries that they have been working with, but there are a lot of interest, high interest of professionals trying to join startups or high high tech companies and mining industries. What would you say that would be a starting point for them to start getting attention of hiring managers and recruiters?
Yeah. It happens a lot, and it is a challenging thing to do. I think it is getting easier though, and the reason I say that is because technology is I mean it has been for a while, but more and more and more it's seeping into every sort of type of business. So almost like every business is kind of becoming a tech company at the moment in a lot of ways. Um, so you can sort of just make sure you're involved with those initiatives in the companies that you're at and exposing yourself as much as possible. Um, and then obviously that, there's so many like little courses and boot camps and things like that that you could do to kind of beef up the resume and get some exposure. Um, but yeah, I think right now, especially in our current market, it is more challenging because there's so many people who do have the years of experience on the market who are actively looking. So it's probably a more challenging time in some ways for people who want to make that transition. But at the same time, there's a rising tide of just technology being introduced into all types of business. So yeah, it sort of is on a bit of a case by case basis, I suppose, in some ways. But um, the other piece, of course, is just networking. I think, if you don't have the technical experience and you're applying to a job that is demanding a technical experience, I think it goes without saying that it's pretty unlikely that you're going to be chosen for the process. But if you get in front of a person, you go for coffees with someone, they kind of get a sense of you as a person, and they feel that energy and motivation that you're really fired up and you really want to make this work. Like, kind of give me a chance. I'm willing to you know, potentially make a pay cut if that's the case that needs to happen. Maybe I don't know, but um, yeah, it just kind of it's so different when you're expressing yourself in front of a person or kind of showing that your motivation by reaching out and saying, "Hey, can I have a 15-minute video call?" Don't expect everyone to have time to have a video call with you, but um, if you do it enough, you're going to get on some calls, and you never know where those calls sort of lead to. So yeah, like I was saying before, it is like an entrepreneurial type of approach, and it is a business development type of approach that you have to take on with your career. And obviously, when you're kind of getting into a new space, you're starting from scratch, so you got to do that even more so.
And I also see that comes down to a strategy, right? So you create a strategy or work with someone that can help you work with your strategy to join this type of industry. And touching base a bit of what you were mentioning about the networking, some studies show that 70% of the jobs are filled via networking, not really through job boards. So out of 250 applicants per job posting, only 4 out of 6 people get interviewed. And referred candidates are 4 times more likely to be hired. So just touching to this aspect of networking, what can you tell us, David, about what are the practical ways that job seekers can build a genuine connections with recruiters and hiring managers?
Um, I think yeah, like going to networking events and trying to get out for those coffees is definitely a big one. I think a lot of people are intimidated by um, in-person networking events at times, and maybe sometimes you find yourself kind of in a bit of a spiral of small talk. And it doesn't really sometimes always kind of lead to job opportunities. And sometimes you got to pay tickets to go to these networking events, and it all adds up and it becomes quite a thing. Um, and yeah, so I think one of the best things that people can do, um, and again, this is something that some people are intimidated by, is being more active on LinkedIn, and sort of sharing more of your voice, putting yourself out there a bit more in a, obviously in a professional way. Um, it's really been interesting to see how LinkedIn has changed over the years. As we all know, a lot of people say it's become like Facebook, and in many ways it has. But I think there's just so much opportunity to kind of share your voice on LinkedIn. And I guess from my personal standpoint, like people might be surprised to hear this, but I don't really like, I'm not much of like a salesy guy. When I go to networking events, it's not, I don't really like to go and work the room and try to talk to everybody. It's just not like kind of who I am. I yeah, I don't really like to sell myself. I really like to sell other people and bring people together. But I personally don't like talking a lot about sort of myself. I feel like it's like it's uh it's almost like bragging or something like that when you're talking to you about yourself. Um, but yeah, what I do like about being active on LinkedIn, is that when I go to these events, often people already know who I am, or they know something about me where we kind of can dive into a conversation about something without kind of being like, oh, well, hey, my name's David. Like, who are you? Like you're kind of asking these prodding questions and stuff. Like as you might have seen, Rachel, I think like I don't post it very often, but every once in a while I'll post a picture of me out of my kayak, on LinkedIn,
Yeah.
and talking about how I enjoy kayaking. And the really funny thing is that when I'm out and about and I run into other people in the industry and I'm networking and stuff, 9 times out of 10, the thing that people say back to me is like, "Oh, like, have you gone kayaking recently? I know you
Yeah,
love
see?
kayaking." And that's like a way to just kind of connect on a non-salesy level where it's not just all of a sudden being like, "Hey, are you hiring?" And like, and that conversation kind of can get shut down pretty quickly. So yeah, I think it's challenging for candidates to make those connections because what you want so bad is to create that end result of an opportunity or a job. But if you approach your networking and things like that as much as possible in focusing on creating that true relationship and maybe getting to know something about those people beyond what their job is, and kind of creating a connection in that way, um, there's a deeper relationship there. And if they kind of then connect with you on LinkedIn and they realize, oh, that's what this person does, that, well, then you're kind of in their brain, and when an opportunity comes up, they'll reach out and they'll do that. But yeah, I think it's a challenging one, but I think it's good to just have a kind of a diverse approach, and LinkedIn should definitely be one of them. It's probably the best, easiest, most cost effective way to do it. Even just liking those recruiters' posts on a regular basis and commenting on their posts, um, is just a good way. There's been multiple times where I'm working on a role and someone will like my post, and I'm like, and I'll look at their profile and be like, oh, like
Yeah.
that person's really good for the job I'm working on. Let's jump on a call right now. Um, and yeah, I'm not trying to get everybody to go like my post right now, but that is a way of just like staying top of mind, of just like, oh, well, it's a notification that pops up on my computer, and that means that I see your profile, and I'm probably going to look at your profile because I'm curious, who's interacting with my posts.
Yeah, it is challenging. And networking is a skill, so we need to build that over time. But especially when you know what type of industry or job you're looking for, I think that just gives you an idea of what type of people that you should be connecting, type of events that you should looking for in your city, and really stretch yourself. Come out of that comfort zone and put yourself out there. Dave, do you have a tip for a type of approach that gets your attention when a candidate reach out to you, trying to network in a virtual space?
Um, I don't like to say there's one sort of way because there isn't, but I'd say more so. maybe the things to avoid, um, which is basically, just reaching out and saying, "Hey, are you hiring?" And that's it. Or, or I don't know. It's a really tough question because, basically it comes down to like recruiters are very much at the mercy of the roles that they're working on with their clients. I think there's often a misconception, and it kind of sucks as a recruiter because there's a line. I don't know whose line it is. I think Joel Algy posted it, and that's where I kind of saw it first. But I think what's the best part of recruiting is you get to help people. The hardest part about recruiting is you can't help everyone. Is kind of the,
Yeah.
the line, and so like people often reach out because they think, oh well, you're a recruiter, and you can help me get a job, and recruiters can help you get a job, but they can't help you in that moment unless they have a role that aligns with your skill set at that time. That's the companies that are paying recruiters. Recruiters are very busy most of the time, um, trying to fill those specific roles for companies. So yeah, I think it's really good just to try to create that sort of friendly relationship, um, and understand that, you know, sometimes getting an answer back might not be immediate. Sometimes it is, but um, I think just checking in on a semi-regular basis and just making sure that you are top of mind is a good practice to have. Um, and just saying something along the lines of like, "Hey, I just wanted to check in. Not sure if you've got any opportunities at the moment that align with my skill set, but I am actively open. Here's my resume. I just wanted to remind you of my profile and yeah, keep in touch." It's just simple things like that, I think is the best way.
Yeah, that's a good approach, because I believe you also have a very busy inbox, and what usually probably happens, that happens to me a lot. Some people, they don't really look much into your profile or understand what you're doing. They just come and drop their resume through the inbox, right? So that's not really recommended. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to know what roles recruiters are working on, but sometimes it definitely explicitly says. Um, but I'm also on the like I definitely agree with that. But then on the flip side of that, I suppose I always think it's good for people to just kind of shoot their shot, and you never know where something leads because maybe that person is like, oh no, I don't work on those roles, but I do know someone. So I do think it's obviously most effective to identify, recruiters that are specifically within your space. That's definitely the best path forward. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like a bit of a balancing act. You want to make sure that you're as focused as possible, but not um, I guess not kind of being overly reluctant to reach out to someone and see where it leads to.
Because for me, I have seen this sometimes. People will just drop their resumes, and I'm not like I wasn't in a position of a general recruiter, so I
Right?
was,
Yeah.
working for a company specifically, and then I would
Yeah.
just receive a resume that had nothing to do with the industry
Oh yeah.
or
Yeah.
positions that I was hiring. So I think it just, um, I would say that it's just good to do a little reading before you
Oh yeah.
connecting, right?
Yeah.
Like just kind of like at least checking your profile and see at least what positions you're hiring, or just before dropping it, because it just, for me, gives the idea that that person is simply going through all the profiles on LinkedIn and
Oh
just
yeah. Yeah.
throwing the resume regardless, not even
Yeah. Yeah.
checking. I think this is something that has to be strategic. You need to be strategic when you are in a virtual space or connecting and really exercising
Sure.
networking strategy.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. I think I was thinking more of reaching out directly on LinkedIn, but yeah, you're absolutely right. When it's like, when you're applying to a job, we all know, uh, it's pretty, incredible how many people apply to jobs that are not qualified, like whatsoever
Yeah.
for a job. And, I mean, I don't know anyone who's been successful finding a job doing that, that I can think of. And it does create a massive amount of work for recruiters and stuff. And I think, unfortunately, there's, you know, some great candidates that fall through the cracks because they get caught up in this sort of noise in the application loop, which again, I think is emphasizes the importance of networking and going
Yes.
beyond just applying to jobs. If you're just applying to job boards, um, you're probably not you're probably discouraged by the feedback that you're getting, but it's not necessarily based on your profile or your experience or anything like that. It's literally that your resume is swirling in a massive list of other people's resumes. So a lot of recruiters are instead, doing a lot of like searching through LinkedIn and looking for candidates directly rather than having the time to go through all of the applicants and things like that. So yeah, again, it loops back to what we talked about before, where the importance of networking, optimizing your resume and LinkedIn profile, applying to jobs in general should only be a fraction of the job search strategy.
And David, with all the recent shifts in remote work policies, layoffs, and economic fluctuations, how do you see hiring evolving in 2025? What are the things that the job seekers should focus on, adapt to?
Um, yeah, I think we're sort of, obviously pre-COVID, it was funny because every now and then it was quite uncommon to have someone tell me, "Oh, I'm looking for a remote job." Uh, it did happen, but it wasn't like an everyday type of thing, because it just wasn't the reality at the time. And usually, when someone would ask, "I want a remote job," most of the time before COVID, it was like, "Okay, well, sorry, I can't help you," because 90% or more of the companies we're working with need an office. Hybrid maybe, but remote is like not even an option. So when COVID happened, it was like overnight everyone became remote, which was such an interesting thing to go through as a recruiter. One of the nice things about that is, uh, you know, it, it was very easy to get on the phone with candidates,
Yes.
all of a sudden, because instead of having to step out of the office and kind of being a little covert about it or having an evening call or something like that, all of a sudden, like the whole day opened up to talk with candidates. But yeah, so obviously that changed when COVID hit, and now we're in a phase where companies are either staying remote or coming back to something, either ends of the spectrum or somewhere in between. Um, and I think the important thing for candidates is to kind of know what works for them, realize that not every company is going to deliver what is right for them. And there's basically just realizing that, there's a spectrum of opportunities out there, and you need to decide what works best for you, and also what your sort of flexibility around those parameters are. Because on one end, you want to get what you're looking for. On the other end, we're in a challenging job market, so there probably needs to be some flexibility around that. Um, but yeah, I think it's just really important right now to realize that that there are various options out there, and you kind of need to do the research to figure out which companies are best aligned for you. And then probably when you're applying, you can explicitly sort of identify that I was interested in your company because this is the company culture that you have, and I understand your company culture because I've done some research about it. I think that speaks volumes because, again, it ties into your interest in that specific company. It means that, like, if I hire you, you're probably going to want to stay for a good period of time because there's a lot of factors that work for you working with us. Um, Whereas, like, it's not a situation where a company's hiring you and thinking, oh, I hope they like our culture and environment. If they don't, they might leave us soon, that sort of thing. And yeah, then now we've got all these different companies who have different perspectives on if they should be fully back in office or if this hybrid is a situation that works for them. There's people who have moved away from hubs to have, whether it's to be in a more of a rural environment or a better cost of living, whatever the case might be. Um, the reality is that, coming back to an office isn't really an option for them unless they move back to the city or something like that. So there's people and companies and things all in these different sort of situations. And I think the important thing for candidates to know and also for companies to know is that there's people and companies who are open to all sorts of different options.
Yeah.
Companies and candidates both need to just decide what works for them and then realize that, um, they're going to have to put in a little bit more sort of effort in terms of finding the right people for their company or finding the right opportunities for themselves that align with what they're looking for from that standpoint. So in terms of remote and hybrid and things like that, it's really just finding the company that aligns with your skills. And I think for a lot of people, that might push them into a bit of an uncomfortable position, or maybe leaving a job that doesn't serve them anymore and things like that, um, which can be kind of a scary thing to go through. But it's also um, really good to go through these changes and challenges, and we grow as people and things like that. I always find that these uncomfortable situations often lead to very, very good things in the long run. And then on the other side of that, with the moving markets and things changing, obviously just new technologies, new ways of doing things. Everyone's talking about AI, obviously, and how that's going to impact people. I think in most cases that's really going to optimize people's workflow and what they're able to do. It's just very important to, I think, embrace it and learn skills that help you do your job better, or identify opportunities that like new opportunities that that you can sort of start to tackle as well, because with new technology becomes new opportunities and new roles to help service those new technologies and things like that. So yeah, I think long story short, with everything changing and things in the world being in dynamic times, I think it's really just more important than ever to really identify with who you are, what you're
Yeah.
looking for, and and I think by identifying that, those opportunities are actually easier to find, and you kind of attract those opportunities as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I believe adaptability will be key for these times. Things are just changing so quickly, and we need to adapt in our current jobs. When you're seeking for jobs, I think adaptability will be key. Well, thank you so much, David. I think just before we wrap up, um, is there anything you would like to share? I usually like to ask for a piece of advice, anything that you would like to share with our listeners just before we go.
Yeah, I think it kind of ties into what I was just saying, but I think something that I've found is really important in people's career journeys is really to sit down and define what your values are, um, and 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 sort of what your mission within your career path is in sort of a higher level. And the reason why I think that's important is I think a lot of people, have a hard time finding fulfillment in their roles at times, and sometimes that can lead to them wanting to, move companies, maybe for right or wrong reasons and things like this. Um, but basically, what I think, when you have your values defined, um, it's actually quite I don't want to say easy, but it's quite clear how you can approach your career in a way that you can express those values. Like for example, I'm a recruiter. Recruiting is a very challenging job. It's not for everyone, and and yeah, I think for a lot of people, it's not the right career path for whatever reason. But um, I enjoy it. I think because I've over the years figured out what my values are, and realized that I can help people through recruitment. I get to meet a lot of great people through recruitment. I get to create sort of synergy and teams, which is exciting. Um, and the values that I have is being trustworthy, hardworking. Some of the people can depend on things like that, and I can express those values through the role that I have. And I think a lot of people out there don't have a clear idea of what their values are, and because of that, you don't have a roadmap to find fulfillment. Um, so yeah, not only does it help you find fulfillment, but I think it also helps attract new opportunities, and people want to work with other people who have values that align with them as well.
100%. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing all of these valuable insights with us today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. And thanks all our listeners that are here with us. So if you have more questions or if you would like to hear more about this topic, feel free to leave your comments. We will come back next week for another amazing episode in the Driven Career. And until then, stay driven.
Stay driven.